The White House held a Tribal Nations Summit recently to support Native American and Alaska Native tribes. Dawn Thompson is director of the Office of Tribal Relations at the USDA. Heather, welcome to the program.
It's good to see you, Mimi.
Tell us about the Department of Agriculture's role in tribal relations and your specific role as the director of that office.
My pleasure. So when many people think about the United States government and tribal nations, they of course think about the Department of Interior, where the Office of Bureau of Indian Affairs is located. But when the United States signed the treaties with tribal nations, it wasn't the Department of Interior that signed those treaties. It was the entire federal government, the entire United States. And so all federal agencies have a trust and treaty responsibility with tribal nations. And we think at the USDA, we have a very special role in that relationship. At the United States Department of Agriculture, many people think of us as the farming entity. And of course, that's true. We're very proud of those roots. But in addition to farming, we're also food. We're the U.S. Forest Service. We are rural economic development, and we are rural food and agriculture research. So pretty much anything that touches on the lives of rural America. And most of Indian country is in rural America. And so we have a very unique relationship with Indian country.
And
that's our job.
Sorry, I was going to ask you about the USDA announcing the creation of a tribal advisory committee. What will it do? Who will be on it?
That's our job, like exactly right, is to have that relationship with tribal nations directly. And the Tribal Advisory Committee is going to be created jointly between Congress and the United States Department of Agriculture to provide a direct voice from Indian country to help us advise us on each of those issues: farming, food, forests, research. And we're really looking forward to having that advisory committee finally set up.
Well, let's talk about food, because your department is helping empower states and tribes and territories to purchase local and regional foods. Why is that important? How is USDA supporting that?
We're very excited about this initiative. As many know, a lot of our purchasing has been done federally and at the national level, and that hasn't been a particularly good path for a lot of our smaller families and producers and our tribal producers. And so our Indigenous Food Sovereignty Initiative, our local food purchasing agreements, those are empowering states, local governments, tribal nations to purchase directly from their local producers and tribal producers and make those decisions that are best for the nutrition and food of their own communities.
And what about food insecurity? How is the USDA addressing that in Indian country?
Indian country has a very unique take on food insecurity. Tribal nations are very committed to growing the food themselves, or what they called food sovereignty. And so we're really trying to empower that path for them. How can we help them recreate local food systems with the plants and the animals that are indigenous to that region and therefore thrive the best in that region, particularly with our changing climate?
And you mentioned food sovereignty. There's also indigenous seed sovereignty. So explain what that is and USDA's efforts there.
Tribal nations have been wanting to preserve their heritage plants for a long time, and it can be quite challenging. And so we have seed banks ourselves at USDA. We are the National Seed Bank, but we are also helping tribal nations learn how to save those seeds, dry them properly so that they will last a long time, and create redundancy. So there are multiple places where these seeds are saved and protected so that these heritage seeds can be grown for multiple generations coming.
And Heather, can you talk a little bit about your own background and what you bring to this position?
I'm a citizen of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe, which is located in South Dakota. And I've been a practicing attorney in economic development for tribes for 20 some years. And my subspecialty is in agricultural, economic development, and food sovereignty. So I am delighted to now have this position with the Secretary at USDA to implement many of the things we've been thinking about for a long time.
And speaking of implementing your priorities, you've been in the position for almost 2 years. What accomplishments can you point to that you're most proud of? And then what are you going to be looking at for top priorities for next year?
I think one of the two accomplishments we're particularly proud of is the Indigenous Food Sovereignty Initiative, because the tribes have told us how important that is to them. And the way we are viewing that is, if the United States Department of Agriculture had been created from an Indigenous lens, it would look quite differently. We'd be growing different foods and supporting different animals. And so we're really trying to take that very seriously. The second accomplishment that we're very proud of is with our forests. Many of our US forests are former treaty lands, former tribal homelands, and we just announced 11 co-stewardship agreements and 60 more in the works that give tribal nations more say and input into the land management. This upcoming year, we're looking on really building on those accomplishments, but we're also looking to removing barriers. As I had shared, if we had created USDA from an Indigenous or tribal perspective, things would be a little different. And what that means is sometimes it's quite challenging for tribes to access our program. We're the 7th largest bank in the United States when you add up all of our programs. And we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to access those programs, including our tribal nations.
And Heather, finally, what kind of feedback are you getting from tribal governments and citizens on USDA's initiatives?
Of course, we still have improvements to make, but overall, the feedback has been very positive. I think tribal nations and Native Americans feel heard by the United States Department of Agriculture and feel like they have an opportunity to really participate in our food, farming, forests, and are excited about this partnership.
All right. Well, Heather, Dawn Thompson, nice to talk to you, and good luck with all those initiatives.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any future Government Matters interviews.